Hello there and welcome to Cansanity. Today we're going to be making Damson plum jam, one of my family's absolute favorite. And I love making this jam in the fall when I'm busy making my salsa and my pasta sauce. The reason being, you actually cook the plums in water and sugar overnight and all the work comes the next day. And so I've just finished making some salsa and I'm just about to put some pasta sauce in my canner, and so why not get these plums ready? So let's get started. Okay, so these are Damson plums. They're a beautiful fall plum and they come into season in my area at the last week of August into that second week of September is when you can usually find them in the market. And I've already taken the stems off and given the plums a rinse. So what we're going to do is we're just going to dump these plums into a casserole dish or a roasting pan. This casserole dish is 5 liters. And so I'm just going to pour them in here. One got away. And then all you need to do is add 5 cups of sugar, which I've already pre-measured. And 2 to 2.5 cups of water. I'm using 2 here. I'm just going to give this a stir. Okay, so now what you're going to do is cover the pot up loosely with tin foil, and then you're going to put it in a low oven, 200 degrees Fahrenheit, and roast it overnight. If you happen to get up in the middle of the night, give it a stir, just because the sugars will sit at the bottom a little bit, and so if you give it a little stir, that it just helps distribute the sugar around. But you want the tin foil to be loose so that some of the liquid evaporates as it's cooking. Okay, so it's the next day and my plums are cooked, and in fact they're cooked and I've let them cool. I've let them sit all morning and cool, and while they were cooling I decided to make some more pasta sauce. So I cooked my pasta sauce and I processed it already, and it's already out of the water bath. And if you're going to make jam, you might want to do something else so that when you're putting all that energy into heating your water bath, you might as well process something else. And if I'm going to process something that's 500 milliliters and then something that's 250 milliliters, I always process them in that order. I do the larger jars first. And the reason being is you're going to need more water. And so if you put the 250 milliliter jars in first and you put all that volume of water, that's a little overkill on the headspace. So why not do the 500 mils first, process it, and then the water will evaporate a little bit as it's processing, and that's okay because you're going to do 250 milliliter jars. And so that's what I did this morning. I did the pasta sauce first, and now I'm doing the plum jam. Now this plum jam recipe I got from a beautiful lady in St. Jacobs, and her original recipe was just to cook the plums overnight in the sugar and the water, cook it for 15 minutes, reduce it, and then can it. And so I decided to take it up a notch and to put some lemon juice and vermouth in it. And so you can make this recipe with just the plums, sugar, and water, and add the lemon juice, or really take it up a notch and add the vermouth. So let's get cutting those plums. Okay, so the first thing that you're going to do is strain out the liquid, and so I usually just take a couple scoops first and then I pour this because this is quite full. wear an apron. This will splatter. Okay. And so we're just going to let that drip for a bit, and then I'll get to taking the pits out. Okay, so you want to wear gloves. If you leave the gloves out, your hands will get stained a bit from the plum, so wear gloves. And this is a fun job for any teenager that you have in the house, or you know, one of the tweens, because you just squish out the plums and get the pits out. So basically all you do is just grab some of the plums and see if there's none, then you just leave that there. You just basically squish out the plum or the pits, and you know, you want to leave as much pulp as possible for the jam. So I just put the pits in a bowl and I just give it a squeeze and take the plums out, the plum pulp out. There's the pits there. So this is going to take about 20 minutes to do, and but it's, to me, worth doing it this way because you get so much more of the plums rather than cutting them and pitting them. And plus, cutting them and pitting them is such a tedious task. I'd rather do the squishing. Okay, so this is all the plum pulp where after I've pitted, and inevitably you will miss a pit, and they'll either come to the surface when you start to put this into the when you start to cook it. Like I can see there's one right there, so I'm gonna take that out of there. But you know, if you leave a pit or two in there in the jam, it's not a big deal. Just make sure to warn your guests that there might be some pits when you go to serve it. Okay, so here's the plum juice, and the pulp is still in the other pot. We're going to put that on the element, and we're going to bring it up to a boil and then turn it down to medium high and reduce that. Cook it for 15 minutes so that we can reduce the liquid. Okay, so while the juice is reducing, I'm going to squeeze my lemons. Now, to get the most juice out of your lemons, I microwave my lemon for 20 seconds, 20 to 30. 30 gets a little hot, so 20 seconds. And then I roll them on the counter. And that just helps move the pith away from the actual flesh of the lemon. And then I have this handy dandy juicer. I love it. And it's just a juice press or a fruit press. And just press the juice out. And I need 1/3 of a cup of lemon juice. I'm just going to press all of these lemons. This just came up. The press is made with just these parts, and this just fits into a groove just by juicing that one lemon. It came up. So anyway, you know. Now, I like to use organic lemons if I can find them. And a tip, if you are going to be doing some baking, you can always zest your lime, or sorry, zest your lemon, and you can store that lemon in the freezer, or the lemon zest in the freezer, and you can use that later. And then I just strain out the pulp and measure 1/3. Okay, so now when the juice is reduced, then we're going to add the lemon juice and the pulp. and then we're going to cook it for another 15 minutes. Okay, so this has been reducing for about 10 minutes, still has a little ways to go, but you can see, you might be able to see that there's some foam that's accumulating at the surface. You can scoop that out, so that's what the foam looks like. You can scoop some of that out if you don't want to have that in your jam. It's harder to do that skimming once you put the pulp in, so if you see you want to take that out, then you can just skim that off and take it out. There's not a lot actually in this pot. There it is. Okay, so as it's simmering, you can skim the foam off if you want. Okay, so my timer just went off, so I'm going to add my 1/3 of a cup of lemon juice. And I'm going to add all the pulp. Stir and bring that up to a boil, and then just boil that. You can hard boil this for 10 to 15 minutes. And you notice that I didn't add the vermouth, that you add at the end after you've done this cook. So you might see as you start to cook the plum mixture, some seeds might come to the surface. You can just fish those out if you'd like. If your jam more pure. It'll become more obvious as this river cooks. There will be a few seeds, pits that I left behind. Okay, so I actually cooked it for 15 minutes. I just knew for the consistency I wanted. You can cook it on that second cook anywhere between 10 and 15 minutes, depending on how you want the consistency. So I went with 15, and I can see that there's a few pits in here, so I've picked a few out. So you can give it a stir, take it off the heat and give it a stir and see if you see any pits that float to the surface. And I did actually skim it a little bit for more foam just before I took it off the heat. And so I ended up missing four pits. Oh, there's two more. You can see them really clearly. Now, again, if you miss one pit, it's not the end of the world. Just make sure that when you give this jam away, that you warn people that there might be a pit or two. Okay, so I think that's all the pits that I can see. Now you're going to add your vermouth, 1/3 of a cup, if you're using it. You don't need to use this, but if you want to add that really interesting flavor, then add it. It's 1/3 of a cup, and you just add that. And give it a stir. And then let it sit for about 5 minutes, and then you can fill your jars. Okay, so I just took my jars out of a 225-degree Fahrenheit oven, and that's how I sterilize my jars. I keep them in there for 10 minutes, and I put the rings in there as well. And I have my funnel and my ladle and everything that I'm going to use for filling these jars in this pot. I'm just going to stick a spoon in there too, because I like to have a spoon. And so now I'm just going to take my sterilized funnel out, and I'm just going to start filling my jars. So you might notice a pit or two. You can pick those out if you want. We're not worried about it. So you're going to fill these jars to a 1/4 inch headspace. I usually go along and go back to fill it to just over half, and then I go back to fill it to the 1/4 inch at the end. So you should get about 8 jars, 8 250 milliliter jars. Sometimes I just get 7, and sometimes I get just a little bit more than 8. Okay, I ended up with 9 jars, and I have enough to bring the headspace up to a 1/4 inch. This is very important. If you have too little headspace, your jars may not seal, and if you have too much headspace, same thing. So you want to have 1/4 inch headspace. I'm going to take a ruler and measure to make sure. You want this jam to you want to have it for the winter, so you want to make sure that your jars seal. Okay, so now I'm just going to check the headspace and add more if needed. Okay, I need to see it down a little bit more here. And this might seem like it's overkill to measure, but I really want these to be for the winter, so I want to make sure that they seal. I'll just do it this way, it's easier for me. That's a 1/4. That's a 1/4. This one's a little bit. Okay, now you're going to wipe down the rims. I use a paper towel, and I just wipe down the rims, make sure that there's no jam. Ooh, that's hot. Because if there's jam on your rim, then that could prevent your seal. Okay, now I'm going to just double check now that everything's settled. And I'm just going to double check a few jars just to make sure that the headspace is correct again. Just to make sure. So now I have 9 jars, and my boiling water canner will process 7. So you have 2 choices. You can do 2 batches, which I think I'm going to do, or you can put your jars in the oven that you're not going to process and just keep them warm. So no more than 225 degrees though. You don't want the jars to get too hot. So just don't put a seal, don't put a lid on them, don't put a lid on them, don't seal them up until you're about to process them. Or you could process 7 and keep 2 for use just fresh. You can just put it in your fridge. So I'm just going to divide this up. I'm going to do two batches. I'm going to do 5 and 4. So I'm going to put these jars in the oven and keep them warm. And I'm going to put the lids on these 5. So I'm just going to take 5 snap lids and put them in boiling water. And just to soften the seal, you just need to do that for 30 seconds. I'm just going to put these back on here because I'm going to put them back in my oven. It's still hot. And just going to take the... Now the other thing that you can do, just to make sure that the jars, the jam has settled right to the bottom. I can see that it has, but you can just take a spoon that you've also sterilized and just give it a stir. And this is pretty liquid, so there shouldn't be any air in there. And that's the purpose of doing that. You also, I see that there's a little pit in here. You can fish out a pit if you can get it to come to the surface. I don't think I'm going to have any luck, so I'll just leave that one in there. I don't want to get any of the jam on my rim of the jar. Again, this is just to remove air, and there shouldn't be any air in this because this is pretty liquid. Now, this isn't runny or jam, but it'll set up as it cools. Okay, now you're going to take your rings and you're just going to go to fingertip tight. Just until you hit that resistance. If you happen to have any rings that have dents in them, don't use them because that could prevent your seal as well. Okay, these are ready to go into my... Okay, so my pot has a rolling boil, and so now I'm just going to put the jam in gently. And I have 5 to put in. You want the jars to be 1 inch apart and 1 inch away from the edge of the pot, as well as 1 inch at least of water on the top of the jars. And I'm easily going to have that because prior to this I processed pasta sauce, and those are 500 ml jars, and so I had lots of water in there for those. It's a little overkill with the 250 mls, but the water was preheated, and that's good. Okay, so now I'm going to put the lid on, and I'm going to bring it up to a full boil again. And in this pot, there's some vents, so the steam will be coming out, and it's clear glass, so I can see right into the pot. I can see that there's a real rolling boil, and that's when I'm going to start my timer. And these are going to be processed for 10 minutes. But it also has an indicator on the top of this pot that when this line goes into the green, then that's when I can start my timer. But I rely on the steam and what I see, and that's when I start my timer. And I will process these again for 10 minutes. Okay, so this is the second batch that I processed. I processed it for 10 minutes. Now, I only had 4 jars in here, so I put this jar as a filler jar, just no lid on. Just put it in the center. That just keeps the jars from, as they shift a little bit in there, it gives them something to come up against rather than the jars that have jam in them. So I'm just going to take these 4 out, and don't worry about the water that's on the top of the jam. It'll evaporate. You don't need to be tilting it around. That's what you want to hear. You want to hear that vacuum create that suction and pull that lid down. Okay, so 8 of my 9 jars sealed, and that's okay. I'll just stick that 1 jar in the fridge, and we'll enjoy it on scones, toast, and it's excellent on vanilla ice cream. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you are enjoying the CanSanity videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have a lot of great content to share with you, and we hope that you continue to follow along. Again, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Have a great day.